Atlantis, the Lost Continent, presented by Radio Canada International. This is the third program in a series of 4 on Atlantis, created, researched, and produced by Robert Zen. In this program, The Other Network, new evidence for an ancient civilization. At the end of our first program, we insisted that the 4 main paths followed by Atlantis seekers, the historical, scientific, mythological, and occult, must merge into one. Now we're going to look at evidence from a time when those viewpoints were fused into a monumental unity, a global network, and from sources as diverse as the dimensions of the pyramids to the legends of the Irish heroes will emerge the image of Atlantis herself as the center of a world that once was one. The first of our many guides is the world's foremost Atlantologist, Egerton Sykes.
When the library at Alexandria was burnt down by the Muslims on the grounds that no literature except the Quran was to exist, a large quantity of historical manuscripts of great importance were rescued by various Arab writers. Between them, they managed to extract the story, which has been published on various occasions, to the effect that before the Atlantis disaster, a king, Saluk of Egypt, not necessarily a pharaoh or an Egyptian, was informed by the court astrologer that a cosmic disaster of some nature menaced the earth, and that he should, for the preservation of the knowledge of the past, build 2 pyramids in which this knowledge would be secure against fire, water, or any other kind of disaster.
Now we'll look at those Arab sources in a little more detail.
First of those was a man called Abu Balk, who was writing in 870 A.D. and stated, quote, "The wise men previous to the flood, foreseeing an impending judgment from heaven, either by submersion or by fire, which would destroy every created thing, built upon the tops of a plateau in Upper Egypt pyramids of stone in order to have some refuge against the approaching calamity. 2 of these, the first and the second, exceeded the rest in height, being 400 cubits high and as much in breadth and length. They were put together so well that the joints of large blocks of stone were scarcely perceptible." The next Arab source is Masudi, who died about 943 A.D., and was the author of Akbar el-Zaman Numad, the fields of gold, mines of gems, from which the following is extracted. Surid ben Shaluk ben Sermuni ben Tamidium ben Tebresan ben Saul, one of the kings of Egypt before the flood, built 2 great pyramids. The reason for building the pyramids was that the king, who lived 300 years before the flood, once dreamt that the earth was twisted round, the stars fell from the sky and clashed together with a great noise, and that all mankind took refuge in terror. Later he gathered his interpreters of dreams and asked them what his dream meant. They did their best, as accurately as possible, and told that a great flood would come and afterwards a fire from the destruction of the constellation Leo, burning up all the world. The king said, "Look, if this disaster is going to befall our country, what shall we do?" They said, "Yes, the flood will befall most of the country." Then he said, "Look, if it will flourish again, or will it remain inundated?" They answered, "No, our country will again be as it was and flourish."
Then, in the words of Egerton Sykes,
The king ordered the pyramids to be built, and the Nile to be led into certain canals and be filled with talismans, wonders, treasures, and idols, and with the mummies of kings. And in accordance with the king's order, the soothsayers recorded all that the wise men had said. On the walls and ceilings of the pyramids, all the secret sciences in Egypt were recorded, and pictures of the starry sky were painted thereupon, and the means of curing harmful things, and all they knew of arithmetic and geometry understandable to anybody who knew the language and its writing. When the building of the pyramids was about to begin, he had huge columns and stone flags carved and granite fetched up from Aswan.
But as you'd expect, the secrets built into these monuments were well protected.
Masudi also referred to the automata placed as guardians of the pyramids. That of the Great Pyramid was an idol of speckled granite, standing upright with a spear in his hand and a serpent around his brow. This serpent garroted anybody who violated the precincts and then returned to its former place. The guardian of the Second Pyramid was a man carved from black and white onyx, seated upon a throne and armed with a spear. On an intruder's approaching, there was a sudden noise, and the image destroyed him. That of the Third Pyramid placed a magic spell upon unwanted visitors, which eventually destroyed them. Nevertheless, some explorers managed to penetrate into the enclosures, and Masudi tells of one such group. The walls were composed of small, square stones of beautiful colors. A member of the party who extracted one of these and placed it in his mouth was overcome with sudden pain in his ears until he had replaced it. Having proceeded further, they found another quadrangle with the image of a cock made of precious stones and standing on a pedestal. When they entered, its eyes lit up, and it crowed and flapped its wings. Finally, they came upon the image of a goddess of white stone, with a covering on her head and with a lioness on each side. On seeing this, they took fright and fled. The Arab writer was Maturdi, who told about an expedition to explore the well of the Great Pyramid, so that after having negotiated the first and second stages, they proceeded until they came to a narrow passage in which there were large numbers of bats, and down which a current of air was felt. One of their number proceeded along this, when the walls suddenly closed in and cut him off from the party. The others ran away, and in getting out of the edifice, several died. When on the surface they were discussing the matter, when their companion reappeared and spoke to them in an unknown tongue. Masudi tells a similar story, but adds that the last man could only say, "Suck, suck, sucker, sucker," after which he fell down and died.
This information has been available in print for over a century. I am not the only person who has recorded it. And yet, to the best of my knowledge, not a single one of the parties which have been interested in exploring the Great Pyramid within the last 20 years had any knowledge of it, or would have been interested in it had they been told. And what is more, they confirm the time given by Plato to a very large extent. And Plato and these people had nothing in common at all.
The Arab confirmation of Plato's dates for the destruction of Atlantis has important implications. What we seem to be learning is that our history stretches much farther back than where the timid Santorini estimates placed Atlantis, a mere 1,500 years ago.
A century ago, or very nearly, when Ignatius Donnelly was writing about Atlantis, our knowledge of the past went back at the